Welcome, everybody. So what I thought I would do today, since we have Passover coming up, is to look at a few different um, midrashim, some of which are from a lot of the traditional Haggadah is really midrash. Because remember, the Haggadah was created by the rabbis around the second century, and so it's not biblical in origin. Which is why when anybody says Jesus, that the Last Supper was a Seder, it was not. It may have been a Passover meal, but it was not a Seder because the Seder had not yet been created. But so what I want to do is look at, I pulled up a few different texts that are mentioned in the traditional Haggadah, as well as some commentaries that I found in a few different places. And I wanted to share those sort of examples and then to see, we have a Seder coming up later this week. I don't know how that happened already.
1 week from today.
I know, 1 week from today. Well, 1 week from last night.
Yes, yeah.
Yes. So you have time if you want to write your own midrash, your own interpretation of part of the story. You will have time to do that. So, first of all, what is midrash? Who wants to say what midrash is? Anybody? Okay, Margot? Just unmute yourself.
It's either narrative text or explanatory text to fill in what we get in our primary text, usually the Torah.
Right. You can find interpretations of other things, but technically, and so some of the things we're looking at might not technically be midrash, but I would say they're midrashic, because midrash is always technically midrash is about. Well, it's not always the Torah actually, because there's midrash on the Bible, etc., but on all the other books of the Bible, or a number of books of the Bible as well, especially some of the writings like Lamentations and all of those. But so it's either filling in a gap or it's explaining a something that if we some kind of a contradiction between the text, especially if something's written twice, or if the rabbis thought, oh, there's an extra word here. Why is that word there? So there's no such thing as an extra word. If there's an extra word there, it has to mean something. So nothing is superfluous. So midrash comes from the Hebrew doresh or lidrosh, which means to ask, to seek, and so it's seeking the meaning. And actually, the one way I love that Rabbi Singer and Chris Shalom over here explains it is he says think of it as like the irritant in the pearl. Like a grain of sand or something irritates in the oyster, I should say, and that becomes
the jumping off point.
Right. So what is right? So it's a jumping off point. So what is the irritant? What's missing? What's the duplication? Any of those things. So that's really what midrash is about. So it's trying to answer a question. Sometimes it's something that you won't even necessarily think of as being a contradiction, because a lot of times it's something written similarly in two places, but it's not totally similar. Like, for instance, the Ten Commandments says, observe the Shabbat day and keep it holy, and remember the Shabbat day and keep it holy, right? So they're two different things. So what do we remember? What the rabbis would say, okay, this is all written by God, so therefore there has to be a reason why, which is why we say in L'chadodi, Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, that in one breath, in one word, God said Shamor and Zachor simultaneously, because the rabbis didn't believe there were multiple sources, as scholars today would say. And the truth is, and I've said this before, it doesn't matter. If you believe it was multiple sources, or if you believe it's one source, but there are two different meanings. Either way, you're doing going through the same process of exploring it and what is the meaning. I have this turning off too soon. So that's an example of a midrash. And other times midrashim become so ingrained in us that we think they're actually part of the Torah. Can anybody, or the Tanakh, the Bible, can anybody think of an example maybe of that? I can give you a little hint, or if you can.
I just want to point out that we're experiencing on this end the same problem that we had last month, where parts of sentences are being dropped out. Sometimes it's just a word, sometimes it's a whole sentence. So if I could ask you to repeat the question, because the last sentence was mostly not there.
I'm sorry about that, Margot. I have to.
No, I understand.
Well, maybe you need to fill in the gap, you know?
If you don't mind repeating, I don't mind listening over. So
create a midrash and imagine what I said. No. So basically what I said is often the midrash becomes so ingrained in us, we think it's part of the actual text. I don't know if anybody can think of an example of that offhand. I can give you a little, of
Abraham and the idols.
That's what I was thinking of. You want it? So what's the story?
Why don't you take it and tell us?
Okay, so if you look at the Torah, and I don't have this in front of me, but so from what you can remember, we know that God called Avram. Would you mind getting me a cup of coffee? Over there. Yeah. I don't take anything.
That's what God said to Avram.
So God said to Avram, please get me a cup of coffee. I don't take anything in it. Lech lecha, go forth to the land that I will show you, a place you do not know. Does it ever say why God chose Avram? Is there any reason given? Or so the other question is, do you know of any reason why? And Margot sort of gave us a little hint there. Why did God choose Avram? What did Margot? You want to?
Well, the text or the Torah doesn't seem to explain why he was chosen, or
right.
At least in my recall, it wasn't.
No.
So there's a story that is interpolated or placed there to explain. And Avram, he was still Avram at that point. I can't remember what his father's name was, but his father. Tell us once again. Zachor? No. Nahor, yeah. Thank you. He owned or created idols. He had an idol shop. One of those big box stores they used to have back then. And the Nahor was away on business or out of the shop, and Avram, no age given at this time, went with essentially a hammer and smashed the idols. And when the father came home, he said, "What happened?" He was distraught. He was angry. And Avram said, well, one idol got mad at the other idol, and a fight ensued. And basically, Nahor wasn't buying it because he knew that the idols couldn't actually do any of that business. But Avram wasn't able to sell to his father before that.
Right. So basically the point of that being that Avram realized that there had to only be one God, that these idols were false, and therefore that's why God, because otherwise we have no reason behind it. And there are other times like that.
Joey mentions Nachshon going into the Sea of Reeds first.
We'll get there.
Okay.
That actually we'll get to today. Right. So that's really what they do. So there's a problem there because there's no reason given. Okay, so in one case, like Shamor and Zachor, it's okay. There's a discrepancy here, and other times there's a gap, and other times there's a blatant contradiction. So I wanted us to look at a couple different commentaries. Again, some of them would be traditionally considered Midrash, others are late. Technically, Midrashim were written in the rabbinic era, and in the Middle Ages, but they are still being written today, and people would say, well, those aren't really Midrash, they're Midrashic. Yeah, either, whatever. I look at them all sort of the same. There's classical Midrash and there's contemporary Midrash. So let's jump to the text. So in Exodus 1, we have, I just put a little piece of it. If the people were oppressed, the more they increased and spread out. So the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites, and the Egyptians ruthlessly imposed upon the Israelites. Oh, and I edited it too soon. But you know what? That's okay. What I really wanted to look at was Deuteronomy 26, starting in verse 4, which is which is bold here. Would somebody like to read this? The whole, all the bold part there.
I can from here.
Okay.
The priest shall take the basket from your hand and set it down in front of the altar of your God. You shall then recite as follows before your God. My father was a fugitive Aramaean. He went down to Egypt with meager numbers and sojourned there. But there he became great and very populous nation. The Egyptians dealt harshly with us and opposed us. They imposed heavy labor upon us. We cried to Adonai, the God of our ancestors, and Adonai heard our plea and saw our plight, our misery and our oppression. Adonai freed us from Egypt by a mighty hand, by an outstretched arm and awesome power, and by signs and portents, bringing us to this place and giving us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Wherefore I now bring the first fruits of the soil which you, Adonai, have given me.
Okay, so this is in the traditional Haggadah. It's part of the ritual, but it's originally, if you look, this was what people said, what our ancestors said when they brought their first fruits to the Mishkan, the tabernacle, to the priest, and then later to the temple, to the Beit HaMikdash. So it's this whole recitation of what happened, of what brought us to that point. So then we get into all this is about if we keep going down, I want us to go to where it says commentaries from Baruch She'amar. Keep going. The first commentary there. So Baruch She'amar was at 20. His name was Baruch Epstein. That's right, Baruch Halevi Epstein. It was composed from 1900 to 1940. He was in Lithuania, excuse me. And he did a bunch of different commentaries. Each one, he used the word Baruch in it. So Baruch She'amar, we know from when? When do we say Baruch She'amar?
Morning. Morning
blessings, right. Blessed is the one who spoke. So this one is Baruch She'amar, and another one he does is called Baruch something. I forgot that a lot of his commentaries use the word Baruch in them. Little play on words. So again, so in Deuteronomy, it says, and they afflicted us. But then in Exodus, right, and they afflicted us, Deuteronomy, and then in Exodus, they said they appointed taskmasters over them in order to afflict with burdens. So he asks, as in other cases, this statement contains a passage from the declaration. We have to remember here that it doesn't matter that Exodus takes place, quote unquote, chronologically before Deuteronomy. There is no earlier or later in the Torah, according to rabbinic exegesis and the rules. So you don't have to worry about the order of things. Just because it's written earlier in the Torah doesn't mean it actually happened first chronologically. So anyway, so the two passages appear to be the same. And it doesn't seem to expand our understanding of Deuteronomy. But Rabbi Epstein argues that the verse from Exodus adds something to our understanding of Deuteronomy. So Exodus, which says, And they afflicted us, add something to the part where it says they appointed taskmasters over them in order to afflict them with burdens. So what I'm actually going to don't go too well.
Okay.
I realize next time I'll figure out a way to so I can do it. But anyway, so basically what he's saying here is what is it? If we look here, what is he saying? It adds to it. If we continue to read down. By saying, if somebody want to read what it says, by saying in order to afflict them with burdens, it suggests.
By saying in order to afflict them with burdens, it suggests that the very purpose of the subjugation of Israel was not to benefit from their labor and hard work, but simply to afflict Israel. Egypt could have afflicted Israel in order to get them to be more productive. The verse in Exodus suggests that they were afflicted simply for the sadistic pleasure of the Egyptians, to make them suffer. By simply saying that they afflicted them, we do not know the true purpose of the affliction. Exodus 1:11 adds this to our understanding of the text.
So what is it basically saying?
Cruelty is the point.
Cruelty is the point, right. And so, clearly the rabbis had an ulterior motive here. They want to make the Egyptians as bad as possible, demonize them as much as possible. So again, at first, when you first look at it, it's like, okay, it's an extra word, but then again, it's not just that they afflicted them, but they made the taskmasters were there in order to afflict them. So that was the reason behind it. So that puts a whole different spin on it, as opposed to, when you look at examples of slavery in history, sometimes it's a byproduct and other times it is the reasoning behind it. Yes, productivity is always part of it, because they're relying on slave labor, right? But is the suffering a byproduct, or is the suffering also part of the reason for it? And Epstein is saying it's the latter. So, and then if we look at the next one, this is again from him. We cried out to Adonai, God of our ancestors, and Adonai heard our voice. So again, what's the problem here? What's either the discrepancy or the redundancy or
Well,
keep going.
we cried out and Adonai heard our voice, meaning was there a possibility for one part of that without the other?
Right. Well, look, that's a good question.
And also that we cried out to Adonai, the God of our ancestors, pointing out that it's not necessarily who we were paying attention to right now, but we went back in our memories and reached out to Adonai because of this affliction.
Right. So what any of those. So, but he's saying, so it could just say we cried out to Adonai, but then again, it doesn't necessarily mean then that God heard us. But if you could say God heard us, then it means you have cried out. But yes.
Margo, go ahead. Oh, wait, mute.
You're mute.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't read through to the thing, but I know the convention is the idea of God responds when Israel cried out. He was waiting for Israel to cry out. So heard here, I would take it, I don't know what the Hebrew word is, but heard here in English would be acknowledged.
Right.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
But
that's true.
So there are a number of different possibilities. What he focuses on here basically saying is it's actually a sign of humility, because it's not, the fact that we called out to God isn't what causes things to happen. It's the fact that God heard us and decides to act. So that it's still in God's hands. It's not up to us. It's interesting. There was a commentary that I read this past Shabbat on, I can't remember who wrote it, but it's talking about the beginning of Vayikra, the third book of the Torah. And if you look at the text in a Torah scroll, the word Vayikra, the last letter, Aleph, is written in small print, smaller than the other letters. Now, it was probably a scribal error at some point, but then once it got there, it got codified. So, but Vayikra means and God called. Vayikar means and God happened upon. So did God call out to Moses, or did God just happen upon Moses? Mm-hmm. And the idea is that Moses wanted to say God happened upon Moses, because then Moses is not, it's Moses's humility. It just so happens that Moses was the one there. Moses wasn't anyone special, and God was like, no, I chose you for a purpose, and I'm calling on you. And so we are saying Vayikra. So this idea of balancing, thinking about when we do something for the community, is it because we just happen to be doing it, or because we feel like we're called to a greater purpose? So you can still be called to a greater purpose and be humble, which is why it's still there, but it's written smaller. So it has that double meaning. So again, what he says here is this statement teaches us that God is more likely to answer our prayers when we are humble enough to ask for God's assistance. Also, right, this is the second part, in the name of our ancestors, not because we somehow believe that we are deserving of or worthy of God's assistance. That's the second part. So that's why calling on the name of our ancestors is so important. I want to jump ahead. These are just some examples.
Put your cursor where you want me to go.
You can see my cursor.
Correct.
I always forget that. Because I want to have time. It's all really interesting stuff.
We'll share this document so you can read through all of them.
Let's go down to the one that says the 10 plagues. Baruch Shamar on Pesach Haggadah Magid, the 10 plagues. And this is something I never thought of until I saw this. So we have all the plagues, and the last one is Makat Bechorot, the plague of the firstborn. So he asked this question. Who wants to read this? The first paragraph.
While the other plagues are referred by their names, blood, frog, vermin, etc., the final plague is referred to with an extra word, makat, the plague. We say makat bekorot, and not the,
we don't just say bekorot, we say makat bekorot.
Right.
The plague of the firstborn, right?
Right, inherently bad and pernicious, such as frogs.
Oh, wait, hang on. You're right.
The names of the first 9 plagues are clearly talking about something that is inherently bad and pernicious, such as frogs, lice, blood. However, it is not self-evident that the word bekarot, firstborn, is referring to something bad. By adding the word makah, we understand that this is the plague against the firstborn.
Okay, because otherwise say the plague of the firstborn, or if you just say the first, these are the plagues, dam, svardea, kimina, blah 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 blah, bechorot. The firstborn are a plague. What is this, right? But sometimes they are. But now here, Rabbi Epstein gives a second midrashic explanation, which I really never thought of. Who would like to continue?
I can just keep going.
Okay, keep going.
Rabbi Epstein offers a second midrashic explanation of this term. He explains that the word makah has more than one meaning. It can mean a plague, and it can also mean an attack. The term makat becharot is reference to a midrash which claims that when the firstborn of Egypt discovered that they would be the victims of the 10th plague, they begged their parents to acquiesce to Moses' demands. When Pharaoh and the elders refused to give in to Moses, the firstborn attacked their parents. This was the true makat becharot, the attack of the firstborn. In Psalm 136 we read, who smote Egypt through their firstborn. What does through their firstborn mean? Why does the verse say that God smote Egypt instead of God smote the firstborn? This verse should be translated, who smote the Egyptians by their firstborn. The firstborn of Egypt rose up in rebellion against their parents and smote them because their elderly stubbornly refused to allow the Israelites to leave Egypt.
So totally different spin on it. and what he does, and this is a very classic midrashic technique, is he connects the actual Torah verse with another verse from elsewhere in the Tanakh, in the Bible, in this case the Psalms, where it refers to God who smote the Egyptian through their firstborn. And I'm sorry I don't have the Hebrew and the English in front of me at the moment, but so again, it's not just God smote the firstborn, but God smote Egypt through the firstborn. So this is saying, what's it saying about the Egyptians' firstborn?
It means this is the most important.
Yeah, but also, what do they?
Well, they weren't babies.
They weren't babies, right? Exactly. So it's not just babies, and also it's saying that they were trying to, we're talking about humility and pride. They were trying to convince their parents to they were trying to convince Pharaoh to let the people go, and everything okay?
Oh, yeah, just the notifications with the alarm before and all that.
Oh, okay. All right. So, right. So in this case, it wasn't that the firstborn were the victims, but the firstborns were the one who attacked the elders because they were being stubborn and were not being humble and were not listening to the firstborn who were saying, let them go. We've suffered enough. Okay. So that's, makes us think about, listening to our, children will listen or parents will listen in this case, or won't they? What happens, when one generation tries to convince another and they just don't listen, right?
I also like the fact that it was, oh, never mind, wait, I lost my thought.
It'll come back.
It's okay.
It takes the onus off of God killing.
It's
not God killing. It's the children doing
right, which is that's a whole other
like a fine point, but it always seemed rather bloodthirsty of God to do that.
Go ahead, Margo.
So the Midrash is suggesting that the firstborn attacked, and then they were killed. But first they attacked because they weren't listened to.
That's what's that's where it gets a little confusing. He's translating it that God, instead of God smote the firstborn, he's translating it as who smote the Egyptians by their firstborn. So
so that really is a minority opinion.
I've never heard this interpretation before, but it puts a whole different spin on it, and also makes me think about what if we're talking about in the 40s in Lithuania, and we're talking during the time of World War II. Is there some kind of I don't know if there's something about that he's looking at it from that perspective during the show-off that had his, I don't know. I'm not sure where this comes from.
I would think that the firstborn would then have to have died, because otherwise the idea of the blood on the lentils would not have had any effect. But what I'm thinking about in terms of the use of makot is that before then, all the other plagues, even though it affected the animals or the water or the environment, ultimately it was affecting the people, the Egyptians, who needed all those things with which to survive. Whereas you have to say, to distinguish the last one, that it is a makot, because in this case it is directly the people, to be specific, the firstborn, and to be even more specific, basically the progenitors and the inheritors of the next generation that are being directly affected. So to distinguish the other makot, from this one would have to add that word just as a point of distinction. I don't know whether what I say makes any sense.
Oh, no, it does.
No, it
Yeah.
does. And the thing is, neither is right or wrong. That's the beauty of Midrash and rabbinic interpretation in general. It has, Elu ve'elu, both this and this are the words of the living God. You can have two totally contradictory interpretations and they're both valid. They're both there. And that's all throughout the Talmud and through the Midrash and everything. So, again, it's unclear here. Okay, so God smote the Egyptians through the firstborn. Did the firstborn still die too? I'm not totally clear on that. And ultimately, it could be both.
Also, it didn't become a accepted or a frequently told midrash, so maybe a lot of people didn't necessarily couldn't necessarily understand it, but it does sort of provide inspiration for revolt and for the youth to rise up against the oligarchs and what have you, and in that time period of early socialism and stuff like that, there was a lot of impetus in the youth saying to the old ways, you don't have the right way to do things, or you don't have the market on the right way to do things. There are other ways to do things.
Well, isn't that always the way it is? I mean, isn't it the young that try to change what's happening?
Yeah.
When you think about it, it's really,
change happens through the young. So I think that's what he was, maybe one of the things he was trying to encourage.
All right. So, yes, this and, right? It's but and, not, it's not but and. It's yes and, not either or. Sorry. It's but and. No, that doesn't make any sense. All right, so the next one is something, this is what Joey was referring to. So I'm going to read part of this because it gets a little complicated. So we have the Israelites at the sea, and Baraita. So Baraita is a rabbinic statement of the Tanaim, the early rabbis, the Mishnaic rabbis, that didn't quite make the cut into the Mishnah when Yehuda Hanasi was putting together the Mishnah, around 200, but it's still recorded. So it's an additional
honorable mention.
Yeah, sort of, but it still carries weight. Yeah. So they're standing the Jewish people stood at the Red Sea, or the Sea of Reeds. The tribes were arguing with each other. This one was saying, I'm going into the sea first. And that one was saying, I'm going into the sea first. Then in jumped the tribe of Benjamin and descended into the sea first, as it is said, again, bringing in a verse from Psalms. There is Benjamin, the youngest, ruling them, Rodem. Do not read it as ruling them, Rodem. Read it as descending, Red, into the sea, Yam. So instead of Rodem, it's Red Yam. So they take this verse pluck it out of Psalms, reinterpret it, and say it's saying that the tribe of Benjamin jumped to the sea first. And the princes of Judah, of the tribe of Judah, were stoning them for plunging in first and not in the proper order, as it is stated in the continuation of the verse. The princes of Judah, their council rigmatam, therefore, so they're rogimotam. It's a with Hebrew, again, because you don't see the vowels, you can see the letters, you can switch them around a little bit. So it's read, instead of that Judah was giving their counsel, Judah was stoning them. So again, therefore Benjamin the righteous was privileged to serve as host to the divine presence of the Almighty, as the temple was built in the territory of Benjamin, as it is stated in Moses' blessing for the tribe of Benjamin. The beloved of the Lord shall dwell in safety by him. He covers all the day and he rests between his shoulders. So again, this is all reason showing why the temple was built in the tribe of Benjamin, and it's It's I can't think of the word. It's my mind. It's like the word goes in, and then all of a sudden it disappears. Like I was saying, I have a mind like a steel sieve. He's raising up Benjamin in this tribe. So there's an ulterior motive here, and often you'll find in the Torah texts and in the rabbinic texts also, which tribe are they emphasizing? But there's a differing opinion here. So if we go to the next one, Rabbi Yehuda said to Rabbi Meir, I don't know if you want to read this one, Joey.
It's hard to tell if Joey's here or not, just because he had to turn camera off.
So Rabbi Yehuda said to Rabbi Meir, who would like to read that part? Somebody who hasn't read yet. Or somebody who has read it.
That is not how the incident took place. Rather, this tribe said, I am not going into the sea first. And that tribe said, I am not going into the sea first. Then in jumped the prince of Judah, Nachshon ben Amminadab, and descended into the sea first, accompanied by his entire tribe. As it is said, Ephraim surrounds me with lies, and the house of Israel with deceit, and Judah is yet wayward toward God, which is interpreted homiletically as, and Judah descended with God. And in this regard, the tradition, i.e. the writings, explicates Nachshon's prayer at that moment. Save me, God, for the waters are come in even unto the soul. I am sunk in deep mire where there is no standing. Let not the water flood overwhelm me, neither let the deep swallow me up. Okay, so we'll stop there. So, two different interpretations. What is one saying? What are they saying? Me first or not me?
Yeah, I'm not going in, I'll go in, and then they're fighting each other, as opposed to the second one, which is nobody kind of wants to go in, and then Nachshon goes in first, and then they take this beautiful prayer from Psalms about the water coming in even unto the soul, which is, there's another interpretation that Nachshon, the water came up to his nose before the sea split. So Nachshon is praying as he's entering the water, and his tribe, Judah, which again is one of the later, after the exile, Judah is one of the tribes that remains, and the temple is then in Jerusalem, which is later becomes part of the kingdom of Judah. So, but then what's Moses doing all this? Let's look at the next paragraph. Who wants to read this? At that time,
Moses was prolonging his prayer. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to them, my beloved ones are drowning in the sea, and you prolong your prayers to me. Moses said before him, Master of the universe, but what can I do? And God said to him, speak to the children of Israel so that they go forward, and you lift up your rod and stretch out your hand.
Keep going to the next paragraph.
Okay, for this reason, because Nachshon and the tribe of Judah went into the sea first, the tribe of Judah merited to govern Israel. And it is stated, Judah became his sanctuary, Israel his dominion. The sea saw it and fled.
Okay, so the Baraita interprets the verses in the manner, what is the reason that Judah became his sanctuary and Israel came under his dominion? It is because the sea saw it and fled. So there's we could go into the whole historical piece about the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel and the war between the two kingdoms, and which we go into history and all that. But basically what we're focusing on here is that, the whole point of this is to raise up Judah and Judah's leader by Nachshon. And also, because all it says in the text is God says, speak to the children of Israel that they go forward and you lift up your rod and stretch out your hand, as if to say they don't know what to do. And what's Moses doing before that?
He's just praying.
Moses is praying and God's saying, look, turn around. Your children are drowning. Nachshon went in before you. Nachshon said prayer while he's doing it, but Nachshon went in before. So you have to take action, right? Don't just stand there and pray. You've got to do something. So there's so many different pieces to this, but okay, there's one more this is how many people have heard of a variation, at least one variation of this midrash before?
That's not what I've heard.
Yeah. So it's one of the more popular ones. And there are different versions of it. Some people give, there's one version that says that's why it's mi chamocha versus mi kamocha. That kamocha is because Nachshon is choking on the water and the cha becomes ka, even though there's actually a grammatical reason for why the cha becomes ka. I'm not sure where that one came from, but I know that's something that I've heard also. So, but again, what's the ultimate meaning behind this midrash? What's the main message? So getting the Judah and Ephraim's and Israel stuff out of the way, that's there too. But what's the main message for us today about this midrash?
Quit talking and do something.
Yeah.
Quit talking and do something.
That's what I was
Right.
thinking to,
Yeah.
Instead of just do something.
And don't argue over it.
Yeah.
It's about unit. It's certainly, prophesying in some way, the disunity among the Jewish people that will happen later. Again, we know that these are all written after biblical times and after the kingdom split and there was all this infighting and all that. They're retrojecting it back to biblical times. It's about unity and it's about action and it's about sometimes it's not the leaders who go first. But, Nachshon was a leader. He was a leader, but he wasn't the leader like Moses, right? Sometimes, other leaders and others have to remind the people who are above them of what they need to do in order to make a difference, right?
I like the version that we use, which is that Nachshon was an old man. You young ones are out there, bickering among yourselves, and I'm an old man, I'm going in.
Yeah. Which is interesting because it's sort of the opposite of the last one, which is the Egyptian youth were trying to convince the elders, especially Pharaoh, what to do. So there's one other that I love this next one because it's one that I remember the first time I learned it, I was like, whoa, this is really cool. So it's a very simple verse. In the Exodus, you see instructions for building the Mishkan. And it says, he made the laver, the hand washing station of copper and its stand of copper from the mirrors of the women who perform tasks at the entrance of the tent of meeting. So who are these women and what are these mirrors? Okay. So this is a midrash. Rashi grabs his sources from a lot of different places, but he brings them together. 12th century France. And he talks about the mirrors of the women crowding. So I love it. The Israelitish women. So somebody want to read this?
The mirrors of the women crowding. The Israelitish women possessed mirrors of copper into which they used to look when they adorned themselves. Even these did they not hesitate to bring as a contribution toward the tabernacle. Now Moses was about to reject them since they were made to pander to their vanity. But the Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, accept them. These are dearer to me than all the other contributions because through them the women reared those huge hosts in Egypt. Okay, so Moses is saying, okay, these mirrors, it's all about the women's vanity, get them out of here. And God's like, no. These are really important. And now we're going to see why. But when their husbands were tired through their crushing labor, they used to bring them food and drink and induce them to eat. Then they would take the mirrors, and each gazed at herself in the mirror together with her husband, and said endearingly to him, see, I am handsomer than you. Thus, they awakened their husband's affection and subsequently became the mothers of many children. And it is said,
Song, which is Song of Solomon, Song of Songs.
I awake the love under the apple tree, referring to the fields where the men worked. This is what it refers to when it states,
Mar'od Hatzavat.
the mirrors of the women who reared the hosts, Midrash. it was for this reason that the laver was made of them, the mirrors.
Okay, so what are the women doing with these mirrors?
Making themselves more palatable to their husbands and
Or
having more
is it
children.
are they playing a game? You know, it's like it's like, you know, they're what, you know,
There's a teacher.
they're in, what did it say,
they're
awakening their husbands.
Well,
could
they're
be-
seducing their
They're
husbands.
seducing their husbands, exactly, because we could say awaken, we could say another word too. They're seducing their husbands using these mirrors, sort of like playing, and again, they connected also apples, you know, apple orchards also have the idea of fertility and all of that. So they're taking these other texts which talk about the apples and the waking their, from the Song of Songs, I awaken thy love under the apple tree. And again, Song of Songs is a love poem, a very erotic love poem. So it's another one of these texts where, you know, so often the women don't get credit for things in the Torah text, although in the Exodus they do because of Miriam and daughter of Pharaoh and others. But here it's really saying, no, this isn't, those mirrors are not just about vanity. They really serve a purpose. If it wasn't for these mirrors, we might not have had all the people in Israel. Any thoughts about that one?
And it was for this reason that the laver was made of them. Why is it like, oh, we're gonna make the hand wash stand out?
Right. Well, the question is, why does it say, it says in the text, well, first of all, the hand washing stand was very important because the priests had to wash their hands before they did the sacrifices. So it was an essential part of the, you know, that's the reason why we wash hands technically before we eat the challah. So, and again, they're it's saying that they made the laver of copper and a stand of copper from the mirrors of the women who performed tasks at the entrance of the tent of meeting.
Margot says it's a laver of love.
Very nice. Very good. Very good. So they're clearly, the rabbis are stumped. Like, what is this? What are they talking about?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Margot.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think she's
no, it may be on our end because
and Shir Shirim, and that that is traditionally the text that is read after the first night of the first Seder, rather.
Right.
On
it's
Pesach,
Shabbat.
so.
Right. It's read. Yeah, it's read during Pesach. So that's a nice connection there that isn't necessarily made in this particular midrash, but it certainly adds another level to it when we're thinking about connecting it to Pesach itself, because it isn't necessarily the Pesach. This isn't necessarily part of the Pesach story.
Exactly. Right.
But I like it you can make that connection out of Pesach, which I like. I really put this. The other ones were all had something to do with the Pesach story. This one I put in because I just really like it. I just think it's a really fascinating. And we, you know, again, if we look at the you know, I could have looked at some of the more traditional ones about the role of the women and the role of Miriam and how she was a prophet because she knew that her brother was going to be he was going to be a great leader, because she's one of the few women who's called a prophet in the Torah, and or in the Tanakh, I should say. Sarah is referred to in the Midrash as a prophet, but Miriam is one of those 7 women who are prophets. Don't ask me to name all of them because I just. So, and it's, you know, what she prophesied was that Moses was going to be a great leader, which is why she saved him. She also, there's another one that I meant to put in here, which was when Pharaoh said, okay, kill all the Jewish, all the Hebrew boy children. Amram, Miriam's father, said, okay, no, actually, we're all going to divorce our wives, and we're not going to have any kids at all. We're not going to have any kids at all. And Miriam is the one who said, wait a second, Pharaoh is saying killed the male children, what you're saying is we're not going to have any children, the people are going to die, but also that she knew that there was going to be a male child that was going to be born, who would be Moses. So, and we know that the Pharaoh's daughter, so there are lots of Shifra and Puah, the midwives, right? Who are, according to some, are Yocheved and Miriam, Moses' mother and sister. So there are lots of other ones that really do talk about the women's role. Yes.
Google AI has provided Sarah, Miriam, Deborah, Hannah, Abigail, Huldah, and Esther.
Thank you.
Thank you, Google AI.
Those are the yes. Those are the women who are prophets in the Tanakh, not just in the Torah. So these are just some of the ones that I wanted to bring in. And so now my question for you is, in terms of the story, we all know parts of the story of the Exodus, right? We know, parts of the Haggadah. I'm curious, if I were to say to you, okay, sit down right now, let's write a Midrash. Well, you started writing one, right?
So we've written our own Passover Haggadah.
Right.
And so we've been playing with this for a while.
Okay.
For years. And the biggest change to the story that we did this week is just the idea of including Yocheved and Amram in the choice to put Moses into the basket, like combining their, so that dad is not left out of that decision making. In a lot of the story, it's just Yocheved and Miriam who are doing that, and Amram is lost in that. And so I liked the idea of bringing him into it a little bit. And the other thing that we have done is we tried to do things to keep gender specificity out of it in other ways. So like God is not he and all of those kinds of things, but also like telling other stories, other people's stories throughout this. This year's for us is going to be about Ukraine. So we're including sunflower seeds on the Passover Seder plate, in addition to all the other things, because the sunflower seeds are about Ukraine, but also about resilience. So, kind of that seeds of resilience coming in. And so those are things that we do pretty regularly. This one is not nearly as dramatically different. The year we did the Harry Potter one, we really talked a lot about, and that's why Baruch, his really resonated with me, because we did one that was all about the youth rising up and telling the adults to, get off their butts and do something about it.
Yeah.
So the Israelite youth or the Egyptian youth?
Anybody.
Okay.
All the youth. I think in this, we're looking at this, it's all the youth.
Yeah. Yeah. And at the time,
the Israeli, both.
At the time, we used the Parkland youth as being, because the youth in the Parkland shooting used the Harry Potter Dumbledore's army signs. Basically, they resonated with all of that, and that it kind of it brought it all into focus for us about how youth need to stand up and put a stop to oppression, and that peace only comes when the youth learn not to oppress others.
Okay. There's some of these are all from different interpretations. Yes.
Joey was saying he was interested in the 4 questions always, and
Yeah.
Ritual Well put out an article, Why is this Seder different? And was talking about how the wicked child isn't necessarily good phrasing from a healthy parenting perspective.
No.
I think most people today do not label the wicked child the wicked child.
In
Right.
fact, ours is the alienated child. Ours says the alienated child asks, what does this ritual mean to you? To this child, he says it because of what Lord did for me when I was a slave. What was done for me, not you. So it holds that same thing, but it's pointing out that this is the child who doesn't have the ability, the community, the feel of community that brings them
Right.
into that story.
Right, and that's the 4 questions and the four children are 2 examples, 2 of the many examples of sort of midrash that's woven into the Seder, which in and of itself is sort of a midrashic ritual.
Yeah,
when you think about it.
Absolutely.
And right, what the Rasha, what the evil son says is not that different than what the wise one says. In terms of the wording is slightly different, but it's really, it's about the interpretation of the rabbis, because they wanted to spread the message. They wanted to say was this is what happens if you separate yourself from your community. If you separate yourself from community, what are you supposed to do? Set their teeth on edge, as you say. If you had been there, you wouldn't have been rescued. I mean, that's not really a very Jewish thing to say when I think about it,
No.
or at least not certainly something I would feel comfortable with, or many of us would feel comfortable with.
Right, and I think it's very important that we include all disabled people. And this is the same thing. People who can't understand. Never have to be included.
Right. So that's the one who doesn't know how to ask a question. It's not just they're so young, but maybe they just don't have the ability, the mental ability. Right. So it's very much about inclusivity, except for that one, which is exclusivity, which is sort of like, again, because it was written during a time when it was really important for the community to stay together. And so they really but they knew that there's some people who were leaving the community, because it was easier. So it was about, you leave the community, this is what's going to happen to you. You're going to be.
And it also implies to the alienated child that we need to learn from history.
Right.
It's because you did not see that this ritual holds any meaning for you with an attitude like that. So that idea that if you don't know the ritual had a meaning and learn from that meaning, it might not have the same meaning for you, but you have to understand that to be able to experience this.
Right.
And you have to learn from the past in order to not repeat it. We also rewrote the child who doesn't know how to ask. We take them by the hand and show them how to find the questions. You are the child whose silence speaks for many who do not know how to begin. We are enriched by your presence tonight. The story will become clear. It will become yours. So the idea that child is not just unable to ask verbally, but doesn't know how to begin the process of asking for help.
Yeah. Because there's sorry.
No. I was using, Margot had pulled up something also as well, talking about the repetition of 4 in the Haggadah, 4 questions, 4 sons, 4 expressions of redemption, 4 cups of wine. Rooted in the 4 expressions of redemption, God uses in Exodus 6:7, promising to free the Jewish people from slavery. So that's where we're getting all this 4 from.
Yes,
I know once we get 2 things before, we just run with it.
But there's also the 5th, which is I will bring you into the land, which is not included, which is why there was a 5th cup of wine, which morphed in, not morphed, it didn't just morph in of itself, at its own accord. The rabbis turned into the cup of Elijah, because that's the cup of the future of the redemption when we do enter the land. So the 4 different types of redemption that lead up to, I will. I know. Again, there goes my mind. I will. Somebody want to help me with this one?
I will bring you out.
Thank you.
I will deliver you. I will redeem you, and I will take you to be my people.
Right. But thank you. So those are the four. And the fifth one is I will bring you to the land. And that one is not in there. So so it's so again, everything about it, about the Seder is a midrash in a way, and also the contemporary additions, like you talked about the sunflower seeds or the orange, which that's a midrash that got totally screwed up.
Yes,
So we
use it the original way, but it's totally. I know it's not right. It's just that we do it this way, and we have.
So what's the original way?
Okay, so for us, the original way is the wrong way. It says, in the early days of feminism, a rabbi was quoted as saying that a woman belongs on her pulpit, the bima, like an orange belongs on the Seder plate. So, of course, now we include an orange on our Seder plate, representing the radical feminist notion that there must be a place at the table for all of us, regardless of gender or sexual orientation. Yes, more recently, the symbol of the orange has expanded to include the LGBTQ community. To speak of slavery and long for liberation demands that we acknowledge our own complicity in enslaving others. For Judaism to thrive, all people must be welcome to fully participate in the community. As Jews, we constantly recreate ourselves. Our symbol of this is the fruit that carries within it the seeds of its own rebirth. And I know that the way the story actually is that the rabbi that was quoted as saying that was actually a feminist.
Well, it wasn't actually a rabbi.
Maybe he was misquoted.
No, there was no rabbi. There was no man
Oh wait, I
involved.
think Marta might have this. Marta's
Yes.
got Susanna Heschel.
It's Susanna Heschel. Yes, go ahead.
Attributed to Susanna Heschel, Jewish feminist scholar.
Not only attributed, it was
Russia
Susanna who said
in
yes.
the 80s. So
Right.
it's more recent.
Right. So it was. So let me see. Hold on. I want to make sure I get it right, because it was actually. It was. She wrote a whole article on it that it was really about. It was a queer, inclusive Seder where the queer women who were involved, who were saying that they wanted to do something that was sort of transgressive or assertive, and they were talking about putting a bread on the Seder plate, and they're like, no, that's like too transgressive. That doesn't work. So they put an orange on the Seder plate. But wait, I'm trying to find the original. Find the article. It was not. There was no male rabbi involved in it at all. It was put in. Okay, here we go. So I want to just make sure I'm not messing it up. So, right, the story. So, right, the story that people hear is that a man or a rabbi, a male rabbi, saying a woman belongs on the bima like an orange on a Seder plate. But Heschel says it all started from a story from Oberlin College in the early 80s. Heschel was speaking at the Hillel, and while there she came across a Haggadah written by some Oberlin students to bring a feminist voice into the store holiday. So it wasn't just lesbians, it was feminist. In it, a story was told about a young girl who asked the Rebbe what room there is in Judaism for a lesbian, and the Rebbe rises in anger and shouts, "There's as much room for a lesbian in Judaism as there is for a crust of bread on the Seder plate." Though Heschel was inspired by the idea behind the story, she couldn't follow it literally. Besides the fact that it would make everything, the dish, the table, the meal, the house unkosher for Passover, it carried a message that lesbians were a violation of Judaism itself,
Right.
that these women were infecting the community.
Absolutely.
So the next year, Heschel put an orange on the family Seder plate because I chose an orange because it suggests the fruitfulness for all Jews when lesbians and gay men are contributing and active members of Jewish life. So the symbolism grew to include people who feel marginalized from the community, the widow, the orphan, women's issues in general, but solidarity with the LGBT community was at the core of it. So again, there was no man in the story at all, and it was put, so it was flipped around.
Yeah. That happens a lot.
Yeah. So it's a very different meaning, but it's still, the idea is that is still about those who are marginalized being accepted, but right, red is going too far. It's not just marginal, right? So, but and also, like I said, it came from a feminist lesbian Seder, and then eventually the story was put in the mouth of a man. So it was, it was really turned on its head.
Marginalized and marmalaized. Marmaladeized.
Marmaladeized.
I have no idea what that means.
Marmalade,
Marmalade.
like orange marmalade.
Marmalade.
She also says she asked everybody to take a segment of the orange and make a blessing over the fruit and eat it as a gesture of solidarity with
Yes.
lesbians and gay men and others who are marginalized within the Jewish community, which would be a neat way of doing it.
Yeah, I like that too. I forgot about that part. But again, also that, fruits, can contain their own seeds within them, the seeds of the future. But, apple, there's haroset, that doesn't focus so much on the fruits. It is fruits and nuts, but, so what I'm curious if other people if there are particular, so we talked about Midrash as coming from the irritant in the oyster, kosher oyster, of course. So what's something that's been an irritant for you in the Seder or in Passover that maybe you might want to think about? Okay, how do we, whether it's a midrashic tradition like the orange on the Seder plate, the angel on the Seder plate. I like that one. Or retelling of the story or change. What's something that's bothered you about the Seder or Passover?
I like the idea of I can tweak this to my will.
Right.
Or in some fashion with that add an orange. I can personalize this. I can make this not just the same book that was handed down from my mother to, and everybody wrote their name on the inside each year. Huge books. They were around for 40 years. Nothing ever changed. So this way, I like the idea of, I've seen putting a tomato on for solidarity with vegetable pickers. I've seen, what else? I'm trying to think.
I've seen olive for peace in the Middle East. There's been others too, and I'm just blanking now on what they are. But the idea of taking the story and expanding it. Yeah,
and finding a way to make it more meaningful for you and yours, or more up to date, or reconstructing it in some fashion.
Right. And I like, the Reconstructionist Haggadah is great because it's taking all the different, taking the 4 children and using that sort of the paradigm throughout the whole Seder of different ways of interpreting the 4 children.
I think that's very important.
Yeah. And also the one that was put out by the Hartman Institute is similar as well, in that way. But, I think the idea of rewriting the evil child, the wicked child has always been a problem.
Yeah, me too.
And yet, are there people, that we would call Rasha, that we would call evil? And what are the criteria for that, if it does exist? Or should we say that ultimately everybody has goodness within them? Sometimes it's hard. Right now, it's harder to say that than it's always hard to say that.
Exactly. I was thinking, yes, it's always hard to say.
So I think the hardest part is that it's so easy to see the black and white of evil and good, but remembering that the universe doesn't work that way, and finding and we have to live in the gray is such a challenge. And I think the Passover Seder reminds us of that, because it brings in these layers, the 4 children, the 4 questions, the fact that we do all of that constantly, yearly reminds us that the reality of the world is a little more gray. It's a little bit more challenging than just good and evil.
Mhm.
Even the Pharaoh was, I mean, a good dad to Moses and, a good grandfather to Moses until he wasn't. Like there's no, he allowed all of that to happen
Mhm.
and elevated Moses until Moses did something that challenged him. But
Yeah.
that's it's there's always gray.
And also, I mean, then the thing is, though, also, if you look at the traditional Haggadah, what role does Moses play in the traditional Haggadah? Nothing.
Yeah.
It's in the more contemporary Haggadah that include more of the narrative, including Moses, and that was, coming from the desire not to, deify Moses in some way. Same reason why we don't know where Moses is buried. If Moses existed, but no, even traditionally, that we don't know where Moses is buried because we didn't want people going in worshiping at his grave.
Yeah.
Right? So this idea that, why do you think contemporary Haggadah put Moses back into the story? Because if you look at a lot of contemporary Haggadah, they really are focusing on sort of the whole story going from the birth of Moses. Whereas the original Haggadah is really more about, talking about the concepts of freedom and slavery and all of that, but not necessarily the people.
We don't deify people like we used to.
Right.
I mean, our whole concept of God and what we believe in as God is totally not going to the grave of some ancient,
Right.
We don't do pilgrimages anymore.
Right, we don't. I mean, other religions too. We don't. But yes.
Oh,
Margo.
sorry, Margo. I had the
No, it's all right. Don't worry. I'm very patient. Listen, if our ancestors could be in Egypt for 210 or 400 years, I can wait. I want to answer your question, Rabbi, and I also want to say something. In terms of why I infer that Moses' story is in there is because a lot of people don't come with the knowledge that you need beforehand, the prior knowledge, in order to make the necessary connections within a traditional Seder. So a lot is being put in. Now, it could have been put in as footnotes because we know that there are hundreds and thousands of variations on the Haggadah. But perhaps some of them are just incorporating it directly into the thing, which would really be making it much more basic in many ways, because unless they're extending the Seder itself, and counting on their guests actually staying to the meal, it would be probably taking other stuff out. Now, the comment that I had wanted to make,
Yeah.
me, the wonderful part of a Seder is the fact that it is a lot of stuff is not given. A lot of stuff is told to us in some sort of allegorical way by virtue of the questions, the costs, the sons, or children, the whatever's going on, the outstretched arm, whatever, which is abstract. And then we have all these things, whether it's traditional Seder plate or the extended, more contemporized Seder plate, where you have all these concrete things which which are not the thing they are. They're all representing something else symbolically. So it is such so much mind play, so much engagement
Yeah.
that you actually have these tactile or five sensory experiences of the story that, I mean, there's so much room for engagement there. If one just
Yeah.
comes to the table with an open and willing mind and heart. Okay, I've said enough.
No, that's
Well,
great.
no, it's making me think, one of the things I was thinking about before, and the other thing with Pesach here is it's at home.
Yeah.
You're creating, you're choosing which Seder you're going to run and which book you're going to use and what things you're going to say. So it puts it in the average person's hands.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, we're going to interact with it, you know?
And I think, there's one thing I'm just looking for that I forgot to put on the, I think we do sometimes need we need a hero sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And we need a flawed hero, which Moses very much is, along with, most of our heroes, in a way. So I think as long as we're not deifying him, but I think, we're using him as an example of, okay, we can all, especially if we look at something like the Nachshon Midrash, which isn't in the Haggadah, this idea that Moses in that moment was very much a flawed hero, because he was too busy praying and not turning around and seeing what the people were doing, right? Another thing that's always been interesting to me, and that's what I was just trying to find, and I thought I had copied it into here, but I didn't, is the whole, Dayenu is always an interesting thing for me, because, what does it mean to say each of these things would have been enough? Like, would it have been enough? We have, yes, it's a matter of being grateful for what we have, but would, if God had taken us out of Egypt but not brought us into, across the Red Sea, we'd still be wandering in the desert. So, what were the rabbis trying to get at with Dayenu?
I think it's just a song.
Well, but it's not, nothing's just a song. I mean, we use it that way, but it's definitely a theology behind that. I'm trying to see if I can find, because
and Maury was also saying Nachshon is not in the Haggadah, but you can readily be placed in with the discussion that the narrative invites us to have. It fits right in, like it does in yours, with the up to the nose and everything.
I'm looking to see if I can't find
I also like for Dayenu, the 1 year we had founding fathers. It was the bicentennial, I forget
it was one of the number anniversaries, one of the
anniversary of something in the country anyway. So we were doing the founding fathers, and we had quotes on everybody's table from different, Jefferson, Washington, everybody was on there. And we started reading them, and we realized that this was Dayenu.
And went around the room.
Quotes, ran around the room, and every quote was like, yeah, that would have been enough, but we needed more.
Yeah, that's true.
And it was really neat. It was.
And if we didn't,
could have been enough.
Yeah. And so if we didn't reach the next step, then we have to figure out, okay, what are we going to do?
That's it.
We're not going back to Egypt.
Right. We're not going back to having a king.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that was the thought.
So I think, maybe if everybody wants to think about one of these things that they might want to write something about, or just have this conversation is a form of Midrash in a way, right? Because if Midrash is about questioning and exploring, that's really what we're doing, right? So it's looking at, what is the irritant that comes up for us in the traditional Haggadah or whatever Haggadah we use, that can then be, that can be used in sort of midrashic discussion, which could become, if you have the time to do what you guys do, which is, we don't all have that, not everybody's going to do that, but it's great that you do. But even just think about what is the, what are the irritants, and what's a new idea that we can come up with in response to them, so that they're not. Because again, they're not irritating, and the irritant becomes a pearl, right? A pearl of wisdom. So
Very good.
it's something to think about as we head into this next week.
Yes, also, and I will send out a follow-up email with the recording, which hopefully, I believe last month did not have the glitches of sound in it. So hopefully the recording is coming through clean, because it's something within Zoom's processing, I think. But I will email
It's
out
the source sheet that I'd really like.
You got that.
Yeah.
I'll
Thank you
send
so
the
much.
emails. So have a lovely Pesach and a lovely spring.
Everyone.
I also included, did Liz, the story of the orange.
Yes, the
I gave you the link to the Heschel quote.
Awesome.
And also, if you go to Safaria and you you search, I shouldn't say Google because you're doing Safaria, so it's not really Google. Baruch She'amar, with that spelling, BARUCHSHEAMAR. There's a whole bunch more stuff that he wrote on the Haggadah.
Okay.
That's really fascinating. I mean, I was not really familiar with him at all, and I really.
And you say his original name was Epstein?
Yeah, that's actually in the text of Baruch Halevi Epstein, or Epstein,
Okay.
probably.
Okay.
You say Epstein, I say Epstein. So.
Let's call the whole thing off.
But Chag Sameach to everybody. I still don't know who the phone is up there, but wherever you
I
are.
don't know either, but thanks for being here.